You've been looking to play Final Fantasy XIV on your Xbox. You may not be out of luck, but I don't think it will be coming anytime soon. So recently, Xbox and Final Fantasy have had kind of a weird relationship where on Game Pass, they're getting all of the older Final Fantasy games, but Final Fantasy VII Remake and the upcoming Final Fantasy 16 are not on Xbox, at least right away. Now, before we get into this any further, if you guys are new here and you enjoy what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow, help grow this community so we can have some great conversations in the comments below. So last year when Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, it was one of the most highly anticipated games to come out in a very long time. I picked it up on the PlayStation 4, but unfortunately for gamers who only had an Xbox, they missed out on playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. Hopefully, though, it's going to be making its way over to the Xbox this year because it's been almost a year since it was released. And then they announced Final Fantasy 16 coming out, and it's going to be another timed exclusive game for the PlayStation 5. In fact, you see here at the end of the trailer where they showed off the trailer for Final Fantasy 16 at the PlayStation event. It says not available on other platforms for a limited time after release on PS5. And then we look here on Game Pass, and Game Pass has all of these Final Fantasy games on there. Plus they also have the Kingdom Hearts series. So it's not like Xbox has a terrible relationship with Square Enix because they still get a decent amount of content, but it is definitely looks like that PlayStation dishes out all of the money in order to get the new games as timed exclusives. And here's another Final Fantasy game that people I think have been wanting to play on other platforms, and it is Final Fantasy XIV. It is an MMORPG, and the funny thing about this game is that when the pandemic started, where we were in lockdown where I just level grinded from level 1 to level 80, which I believe is still currently the level max in this game, so it kind of has a special place in my heart. But I had to do it on PC, and would have been cool if I was able to also play it on Xbox because I would have been able to play in multiple locations. So there are some interesting reports today about Final Fantasy XIV potentially coming over to other platforms, including the Xbox. And it first started off like sounding that there was no chance that this would happen. Now this all stems from an interview in the Washington Post with Final Fantasy XIV's director and producer Naoki Yoshida. And here is what he says about Final Fantasy XIV. We provide content on a fairly regular basis, and our cycle is rather condensed, and it is fairly stable cadence that we continue to follow. We have to think about long-term planning with additional platforms. We need additional testing for the particular platform, so it kind of exponentially grows the amount of resources that need to be allocated. And this is because the Washington Post inferred from its discussions that Square Enix isn't planning on the Xbox version in the near future. So that kind of sounded like they may not have the resources, or they don't want to allocate the resources to bring the game over to the Xbox. Maybe it's because Square Enix does not think there would be a big enough fan base or community that would want to play Final Fantasy XIV. So to them, it's not really worth the time and investment to actually put in to make that game work on the Xbox consoles. But then there is an update February 18th, 2021. And now it sounds like Xbox versions might be coming in the future. So this is an interview with VG247, again with Naoki Yoshida, and he elaborated more on the Xbox version, noting that there are no boundaries holding the Xbox version back. There are no obstacles for developing the Xbox version. We were able to undertake development and provide our service thanks to the immense efforts that Phil has invested. For that, we are truly grateful. The sole factors are the workload and the order of steps. Now, when it comes to the Xbox version, there's unfortunately not much I can say presently, but just that we cannot work on all these steps simultaneously and need to follow the order for proceeding with these things. Since we're currently involved in the development of Endwalker and preparing the PS5 version to follow on from the title service on PS4, it'd be appreciated if we can return to touch upon the Xbox version once things are settled. Now that quote is a lot more promising. That does sound like they are working on Endwalker, and once they're done Endwalker, they will consider looking at releasing the game on the Xbox. And what I really like here, what he said about Phil and the efforts that he has invested in just removing obstacles for developing an Xbox version, which is really cool to see. It really shows that Xbox does understand that there is definitely a large base in Japan that if they want to tap into, they're going to have to get games that are popular. They're going to have to get more Japanese games, more JRPGs. And at the same time, Final Fantasy is an extremely popular series in North America. And I think that if it were to ever make its way onto Xbox, I think it would definitely have a relatively big player base from the Xbox consoles who want to play MMORPGs. But overall, I mean, I find it interesting how Square Enix handles their games because, like I said, they have lots of games on Game Pass, and then they have those timed exclusive deals with PlayStation, obviously because Sony and PlayStation give them a lot of money. I think those are some of the big things that Sony is trying to do this generation in order to kind of counter what Xbox is doing by acquiring Bethesda, is to be paying those sums of money for those timed exclusives, so that if you want to play a game like Final Fantasy 16 right away, you have to get it on the PlayStation 5. And then we saw Final Fantasy 7 Remake, like I mentioned, and I'm hoping that game gets a release date on Xbox sooner rather than later. But overall, I mean, I think there is a place within the ecosystem for Final Fantasy 14. We saw Phantasy Star Online 2 enter the Xbox ecosystem. I don't know what the player base is like in that game, but I think it must be pretty decent. And then we see a more Western MMORPG on Game Pass, The Elder Scrolls Online. So if they were to bring Final Fantasy 14 over to the Xbox, I'm guessing it could make its way onto Game Pass as like the free version, and then you'd have to pay the monthly subscription to Square Enix if you wanted to continue playing for a long time. That was the thing for me, why I stopped grinding once I hit level 80, is because I just didn't want to pay that monthly subscription again. But I mean, I probably would dish out another month to play the Endwalker expansion when it is released. And if there's ever a version on Xbox, I would do it on Xbox as well, because I found that playing this game, it's a lot of just like, you know, leaning back and relaxing and everything. And although it is still probably best playing with a mouse and keyboard because it is an MMORPG, I sometimes felt like, hey, maybe I would just like to kind of lean back and on my couch and just kind of grind through some of the stuff that I don't have to pay too much attention to. So here's hoping that it does make its way over. Hopefully Phil continues to work hard in removing all of the roadblocks for these games to make its way over to the console, to the ecosystem. It sounds like he really is working hard in working with developers to make sure there's nothing in place that would really deter them or stop them from wanting to bring over their games to the Xbox platform. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Would you like to see Final Fantasy 14 make its way over to Xbox? Do you think it ever will? Do you think when Endwalker is released, it will make its way over after that? Let's hear all your thoughts about this in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you are new here and you like what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow, help grow this community, so we can have great conversations in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for your support. I'll catch you in the next video.